Moin, ihr wunderbaren Menschen des Interwebs. Ich begrüße euch ganz herzlich zurück zu meinem Let's Play von The Great Ace-Attorney Chronicles. Wir wollten, ich glaube, einmal zu Caden gehen und mit Caden reden, wenn das richtig ist. Neue Location hinzugefügt. Ja, die wird mir jetzt gar nicht angezeigt, die neue Location. Oder als neue Location zumindest. Aber ja, Prison Governor's Office. Und wir dürfen nicht vergessen, wir müssen auch nochmal gucken, ob Kazuma wieder da ist. Oh, back again, are you? Yes. Hello. I've heard all about your investigations. I read the report just now. You found them, eh? Vigil? Yes, luckily. Well, anywho, the lady doesn't work here no more, so your case is not to do with Barclay. I wouldn't like you to get the wrong idea about that. Of course, yes. Mr. Vigil stopped working here 10 years ago now, so... Yes, we have seen his dismissal notice, haven't we? He was given the job. Oi, Kim, you can very well. So how about we handcuff biscuits? Oh, they really are like little handcuffs, and as hard as irons too. So, what's brought you down here today? Well, there's something else we would like to ask you about, actually. Is that so? We believe there might have been a document that disappeared from Genjin Asogi's cell. I think it's been called the Asogi Papers or something. Did I not say, Gregson's death is not to do with things that might have happened at Barclay. Leave the past in the past, laddie. Let's not further reboot the irrelevant details. His expressions changed completely. We are clearly onto something here. That murderer's botched execution and the whole miserable escape. They were Barclay's darkest hour, a shocking embarrassment. Because the convict had a collaborator on the prison stuff, you mean? Aye, for shame. The coroner who confirmed the death of the man after his execution, Courtney Syfe, and my chief warder at the time, Vigil, who was in charge of the whole affair. But Mr. Vigil says he didn't know anything about it. The rascal wouldn't not say otherwise, huh? More handcuffs? Oh, how could I say no? You can never have too much iron in your diet. When Mr. Vigil was handed his dismissal notice as a result of what had happened, he was so despairing, he jumped out of your office window, didn't he? I didn't like to say, but that's just Vigil trying to get out of it. Do you not think he wouldn't have jumped from the stock of his crimes being exposed, huh? I do. You wouldn't say otherwise, so would you? Of course, I can shun all responsibility myself. I shouldn't have let him deceive me. Actually, there's barely anybody that can what went on at the time now. We Gregson having been murdered and Dr. Syfe forbidden from having any visitors. No visitors? Someone obviously doesn't want her giving anything away. Well, we're not going home empty-handed. And I wouldn't dream of sending you packing. We've not, Kimmer. Here, take a handcuff or two. Oh, well, it would be rude to say no. Wouldn't want to become anemic. I suppose, if there's anybody who might still keen about what happened back then, it would be that last from the forensic division, Maria Gori. Aye, Syfe's daughter. She didn't have no more, just the one. But the wee parents followed in her mom's footsteps. You didn't ever see her without a scalpel in her hand. Ich finde dem seinen Akzent so anstrengend. Ich meine, ich lese ihn auch nicht richtig vor. Mama, what is this? Dr. Sai's daughter, Maria Gori. I could do with talking to her. So, she's Dr. Sai's daughter, but her surname is Gori? Aye, there's some family history, I'm sure, but I didn't keen the ins and outs of it. She grew up watching her mom working with the bodies of folk who died in strange circumstances, and decided to do the same with her own life. I kinda understand it myself. Perhaps she was driven by a deep respect for her mother. Perhaps. Anywho, she was in charge of Gregson's autopsy, I believe. Right, and the coroner responsible for this incomplete report. Someone told me once that the wee lassie always loved her mom's stories about cutting up bodies. There's even a rumor that she used to listen to the funeral march as a lullaby. Well then perhaps her mother might have told her about the autopsy from the case 10 years ago. Aye, I would say there is a fighting chance at least. After all, that was a life-changing case for all of us. You really need to speak to Miss Gori herself about this, I think. Well, thank you very much. I'm not happy about any part of this. It took years for Londoners to finally forget the whole professor business. Can you not give up on this, laddie? Stop asking pointless questions. I am sorry, I don't like dredging up these painful memories for everyone. Can you not just stay away, no? Leave me alone and then come back here, eh? Ich gehe, sobald ich meine letzte Frage gestellt habe. How'd you come to keen about that, laddie? There's no many folk, even here in the prison, who've heard of those papers. Well, I can't tell him, Mr. Wigil told me. I'm afraid our sources must remain confidential, sir. We've been led to believe the papers are actually a last will and testament, is that right? The professor's, or rather Genji Nesogi's... Aye, that's right. You're well informed, Jimmy. Oh, is that the end of the silent treatment? But then after the convict's execution, it mysteriously vanished from his cell, didn't it? Evers, no, you're off at half-cooked there. I think you didn't quite get your facts straight. It was there in the cell, exactly where it should have been. Not what we heard elsewhere. Let me just have a wee walk around in here. I'm sure I can find it. Aye, here you are. See? The last will and testament of Genji Nesogi, written with a calligraphy brush. Of course, I cannot read a word of those Japanese squigglies, but I mind it says he leaves all his worldly possessions to his son back in his homeland. Yes, that's correct. That's the gist of it. So these are the Asogi papers. Aye, of course they are. Papers written by Asogi, named up to boot it. There's no mystery here, laddie. That's your lot. After all the skirmish of that slicer of an execution, we sent the man's possessions back to his clan in Japan, and that was the end of it. I think we ought to make a record of this, Mr. Naruhodo, just in case. Okay. Ich werde gerade das Gefühl nicht los, dass das nicht alles war von den Papieren. One thing before you go on your way, Mr. Naruhodo. Those papers are not to do with Gregson's death. I would prefer it if you did make no mention of them outside of this office. Or rather, I wouldn't just prefer it. Consider it an order from the highest levels of our government. I understand. Gut, dann lasst ihr uns mal definitiv als nächstes vorzeigen. In der nächsten Verhandlung. Okay, Asogi Papers. Last will and testament of Genji Nesogi. I, Genji Nesogi, hereby request that upon my death, any and all material possessions and wealth belonging to me in London be delivered to my son Kazuma Asogi in the Empire of Japan. It is with deep sadness that I accept my fate in this foreign land in the knowledge that I will never see my homeland or family again, but I regret nothing about my chosen path. Okay. glaube trotzdem nicht, dass das alles ist. Bin mir sehr sicher, dass da ein Teil von fehlt. Aber gut, wir gucken jetzt einmal zu Kazuma. Schauen mal, ob der hier wieder hier ist. Nee, falsch. Wo haben wir es denn? Prosecutor Office, da war es doch gerade. Da möchte ich einmal hin. Gucken, ob Kazuma wieder hier ist. Sieht gut aus. Kazuma. I thought it wouldn't be long before you paid me a visit, Ryunosuke. I was right about what I said, wasn't I? Sorry. But you have all the makings of a great defense lawyer. Well, I always believed that you would fulfill your dream of advocating in the British courts. I just never imagined for 1 second that it would be as a prosecutor. Seeing you stand in a foreign courtroom so gallantly, realizing your dream, Kazuma-sama, I am truly happy for you. And I am truly thankful to you, Judicial Assistant Mikotoba. Ryunosuke, I always thought it would be fun for you and I to shake up the British legal system a little together. This isn't quite how I envisaged it, but I suppose it's just another twist of fate. I have learned a lot of things during my time in London, about how Susato-san's father was himself a visiting student here once, along with Judge Shigoku, and about what happened with your father. Then you will have no difficulty understanding why I had no choice, why I had to find a way to get to Britain as a visiting student myself. I want to hear it from you, Kazuma. As you wish, Ryunosuke Naruhodo. Mag das nicht, dass der so kalt und distanziert mit uns umgeht. It's getting on for a year now, since what happened on the SS Beria. We were heading across the oceans from Japan to Great Britain. When a bizarre series of coincidences led to those tragic events, I thought I would lost my best friend forever. I had lost my best friend forever. I must have been unconscious for a long time. When I awoke, I was lying on a bed. It was a narrow little room. There was a posy of flowers by the pillow. It took me a little while to realize that I was in the cabin of a ship. I slipped out of the room and headed up onto the deck. Were you already suffering from amnesia at that point? Yes, I didn't know what had happened or where I was. There was just this voice in my head. You have something you have to do, something no one else can know about. Go to Great Britain, your task awaits you there. It was a calling I couldn't ignore. It compelled me relentlessly. Out on deck, I saw that I was on a huge steamship and we were docked in a large port. It must have been Hong Kong. Yes, it must have been, presumably just before they were due to carry your body off the ship. I had no idea of the situation, but I did have the feeling that this was in some way my last chance, so I concealed myself among the disembarking passengers and went ashore. Then I disappeared into the crowded street of that foreign port city, so I could plan my onward journey to Great Britain. Just under a year ago, with all my past memories lost to me, I was left behind in Hong Kong. Everything was foreign to me. The sights, the sounds, the smells, my head reeled. I was truly at a loss. I realize now that I'd escaped as a dead man, with nothing but the clothes on my back, no money of course. Oh, how terrifying for you. Luckily though, I had 2 feathers in my cap, one being your knowledge of English, I suppose. That's right, and on the back of that I was able to pick up some work as a deckhand on a cargo ship. Eventually, after calling at countless ports, I finally arrived at Dover. That must have been some 3 months ago now. Your formidable tenacity of purpose showing itself again. I mean, the man had lost his memory and had literally nothing to his name, but he still managed to make his way to London on the opposite side of the world. Of course, I had no idea why I'd moved heaven and earth to get here at that point. So, how did you end up becoming Lord von Sieg's apprentice then? That can only be called an extraordinary stroke of luck, really. You see, I was stopped at the border because I had no papers. They took me straight to Scotland Yard. And by sheer coincidence, Lord Strongheart was there to attend a meeting. That's when the second feather in my cap came into play. Would that have been your knowledge of the law? Yes, exactly. Lord Strongheart was curious about an Easterner with intimate knowledge of British law. He took me back with him to the Supreme Court and assigned me to the prosecutor's office. And then 9 days ago, you finally got your memory back after the trial. Yes, I did. Ever since I first met you at Yume, you talked about your dream. Mark my words, Ryunosuke, I will be chosen as a visiting student and make my way to Great Britain someday. Did you know the entire time about what happened to your father here? 16 years ago. When my father left on that exciting trip to Great Britain, I was just a boy. We took a photograph together the day before his departure. It's my last memory of him. But what I remember most about my father is his unswearing sense of justice. 6 years after he left, a gentleman called at our family home. He told me that Genjin, my father, had been taken ill in England and passed away. It was Professor Mikotoba, your father, Susato-san. Ever since then, the professor was very good to me. He even helped to fund my university education at Yume. I will be forever in his debt. But nevertheless, I just couldn't bring myself to believe what he told me. Then one day, a letter arrived at our house from Britain. There was no indication of the sender, so I opened it assuming it was from an old acquaintance of my father. What I read in that letter changed my entire life. What did it say? It said that my father had been a mass murderer, and the writer cursed the Asogi name. As a result of that letter, I found out what had been hidden from me all of those years. Presumably, the letter was sent from a relative of one of the victims. If whoever it was had been a member of the judiciary, he could have been present at the closed trial. The letter revealed that my father had been sentenced to death, executed for being a killer. I'm so sorry you had to find out that way. I imagine the British government did its very best to silence whoever sent that letter, but someone who knew the truth and couldn't bear the resentment was always going to be a problem. But still, it could have been written by anyone. Why would you believe such a thing? There was a newspaper cutting included with the letter. It was the first I'd ever heard of the professor and his terrible killing spree. Well, what did my father have to say about the letter? I couldn't bring myself to show it to him. Why not? Because he deliberately concealed the truth from me by telling me my father was taken by a fatal illness. That couldn't have been easy for him, and he'd done it out of consideration for my feelings. So instead, I showed the letter to Judge Shigoku, to the other visiting student. He faltered for the briefest of moments, but then he just laughed the letter off. But in that moment, I saw it on his face. He was undeniably shocked, shaken momentarily before recovering his pose. A year later, my bereaved mother succumbed to the strain of grief, and she too passed away. That's when I made up my mind that one day, without fail, I would cross the seas to Britain and seek the truth for myself. the truth about my father, Genjin Isogi. And I wouldn't let anyone stand in my way. Oh, Kazuma-sama. Er tut mir so unfassbar leid mit allem, was er durchmachen musste. Und er hat seinen Vater sehr früh verloren. Er hat ihn ja schon länger nicht mehr gesehen. Und dann bekommt er nur die Nachricht, dass sein Vater verstorben ist. Und dann ist auch noch seine Mutter verstorben. Und dann, er war ja als einziger da noch übrig. Und dann erfährt er auch noch so, dass sein Vater ein Massenmörder gewesen ist, der unschuldige Menschen getötet haben soll. Also, das ist schon extrem, was er dann durchmachen muss. Und was ich mich jetzt frage, ist, ob das jetzt nur so eine Fassade von ihm ist, also dass er sich stark gibt nach außen hin, aber innen drin eigentlich komplett verloren ist und aufgewühlt ist und ja, überfordert vielleicht auch. Das würde mich interessieren. Aber ich weiß jetzt halt nicht, wie tief das Character Development geht in dem Game. Aber das würde mich eben interessieren, wie es im Inneren von ihm wirklich aussieht. Weil seitdem er hier ist und seitdem er seine Erinnerung wieder hat, ist er auch anders zu uns. Zu seinem besten Freund. Er ist ja sehr kalt und distanziert zu uns. Und ich habe eben auch das Gefühl, dass da noch mehr hinter allem steckt. Ich meine, auf jeden Fall steckt da noch mehr hinter diesem Professor Case und allem. What we learned today in court turned things completely on their head. It was an impressive piece of lawyering, Ryunosuke Naruhodo. Lord Von Zieks isn't the Reaper, you know. I almost don't want to believe it myself, but it turns out that Inspector Gregson himself, the victim, was. It's clear that the Inspector was behind the Reaper's activity all along. Wait, you mean you knew? The real question is, who's been giving orders to the Inspector? Yes, Barak Von Zieks is the real Reaper. And I know that 10 years ago it was him who decided my father must be a mass murderer and sent him to his grave. No, he was merely seeing that justice was done as the law dictates. He's not to blame. Ultimately, it's people who condemn people. The law is just a tool that they use to do it. Das stimmt. And when a man condemns another, he must take responsibility for his actions. Of course he must. But I know for certain that my father would never have taken another man's life. Kazuma. On the contrary, my father's life was taken by the Reaper. Da bin ich auf Kazumas Seite tatsächlich. Ich kann mir auch beim besten Willen nicht vorstellen, dass von allem, was ich jetzt gehört habe über Genjin Isogi, von verschiedenen Personen, kann ich mir wirklich nicht vorstellen, dass er ein Massenmörder ist. Also, das kann ich mir einfach nicht vorstellen, dass er das ist. Können wir Kazuma noch irgendwas zeigen? Ja, das ist der Red-Headed League Article. Okay, das ist das Dismissal Notice. Gregsons Photograph. Ich meine, eventuell den Autopsiebericht, weil der Autopsiebericht Corona Maria Gori, weil der ist ja unvollständig. Ne, Time of Death wurde ja hier gar nicht reingeschrieben. Und ich frage mich, ob Kazuma mehr weiß als wir. Weil die Forensik ja immer mehr mit dem Staatsanwalt zusammenarbeitet. This came up in the trial, didn't it? As something a little dubious, I mean. The fact that no time of death was recorded on Inspector Gregson's autopsy report. Yes, there were some unexpected turns in the courtroom earlier. The suggestion you came up with certainly took everyone by surprise. The idea that the victim died the previous day at some other location is quite something. Well, considering when the pocket watch had stopped and the scorch marks on the candle, it's certainly a distinct possibility. The evidence and the scene both point to it. To be honest, it bothered me too, so I paid a visit to the autopsy room earlier. The coroner responsible wasn't there, but I got a name. It's Dr. Gori. If it wouldn't trouble you, Kazuma-sama, we would very much like to speak with the coroner too. Of course, the last thing I want is for anything to be brushed under the carpet. Scotland Yard's autopsy laboratory is behind Lowgate Cemetery. By Barclay Prison, you mean? Ah, you know it, do you? The prison where my father was incarcerated and dropped off his life. Kazuma-sama. Well, thank you. We will pay a visit to the laboratory later today. Ryunosuke, I want to thank you. What for? For this. You safeguarded the soul of the Asogi clan. Well, it is a famous sword that's been in your family for generations. My only slight regret is that I never got the chance to draw it before I returned it to you. Karuma is said to have been forged by a master swordsmith during the Sengoku Warring States period. I come from a long lineage of warriors, many of whom were expert swordsmen. Well then, you're a chip of the old block, I would say. This blade, Karuma, is the symbol of the Asogi clan's honor and might. Apparently, one of my father's apprentices even took the blade's name for his surname. Really? Karuma. It does sound formidable, that's for sure. 16 years ago, when my father was a visiting student here in London, he had this sword forever at his side, which is why it means so much to me that I have it by my side again now too. And that is all thanks to you. It was an honor. Now, I have preparations to make for tomorrow. Perhaps I said a little too much. Kazuma, you have changed. No, Ryunosuke, I haven't changed at all. It's you who's changed. I can completely understand your resentment of Lord von Zieks given what happened, but the fact is, those events and this case are, well, unrelated. Is that what you want to say? How can you be so sure? What do you mean? Never mind. That man is the Reaper, and it's for that reason that the inspector was killed. I'm going to prove as much in court tomorrow, by whatever means necessary. I can't let you do that, Kazuma. I know you will do what you have to do as a lawyer, but I'm sure I don't need to tell you that I won't be taking any prisoners in the courtroom. I would expect nothing less. Until tomorrow then, in the Old Bailey. Okay, lasst uns wetteifern und es geht dabei nur um Van Zieks Leben. Das klingt fantastisch. Nee, tatsächlich macht es mir sehr, sehr große Freude, mit Kazuma zu reden, auch wenn ich nach wie vor empfinde, dass er ein bisschen distanzierter wirkt, auch wenn er meint, er hat sich nicht verändert. Ich bin da immer noch so ein bisschen der Ansicht, dass er sich verändert hat, aber ich denke mal, wir werden da mehr herausfinden, wenn wir der Story weiter folgen. Unser nächstes Ziel ist dann einmal die Forensik und wir werden mal gucken, ob wir etwas herausfinden können, ob die Tochter von Dr. Seif mit uns reden möchte. Und dorthin gehen wir dann im nächsten Part. Wie immer bedanke ich mich ganz herzlich fürs Zusehen. Hoffe, ihr hattet Spaß. Und wenn ihr mögt, sehen wir uns sehr, sehr gerne im nächsten Part wieder. Bis dahin. Ciao.